My name is Sabrina, I'm 32, and I own a tech company valued at over $50 million. But 3 years ago, I was lying in a hospital bed abandoned by my husband James, who left me for a wealthy woman while I was fighting for my life. Yesterday, he walked into my office building, resume in hand, begging for a job, after his rich mistress Eliza left him penniless. Life has a way of coming full circle, doesn't it? Before I tell you how I went from being left to die to making him beg on his knees, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this story unfolds. I met James during our sophomore year of college. We were both ambitious students with big dreams. I was studying computer science while he pursued marketing. We clicked instantly, staying up late, discussing our future goals over cheap coffee and ramen noodles. After graduation, we moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment in Seattle. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, and we filled it with love and dreams. I landed a job at a small tech startup as a junior developer. The pay wasn't great, but I was passionate about the work and saw potential for growth. James secured a position at a prestigious marketing firm. We were both working long hours, often coming home exhausted, but we always made time for each other. Friday nights were sacred, no work allowed. We'd cook dinner together, open a bottle of wine, and talk about our week. "One day, we'll have enough saved for a down payment on a house," James would say, sketching floor plans on napkins. "With a backyard for the kids, we'll have someday." We agreed to focus on establishing our careers before starting a family. James was particularly adamant about achieving financial stability first. "I want to give our children everything I didn't have growing up," he'd explain, referencing his modest upbringing. After 2 years at the startup, I was promoted to project manager. My team had developed an innovative solution that caught the attention of industry leaders. The night I got promoted, James surprised me with dinner at an upscale restaurant we normally couldn't afford. "To my brilliant wife," he toasted, his eyes shining with pride. "This is just the beginning for us." Looking back, I should have noticed the subtle shift in James around that time. His interests gradually changed. He became more conscious of brand names, more aware of status symbols. When his colleagues invited us to dinner, he'd insist on wearing his one designer suit purchased during a rare sale. "Perception is reality in business," he'd say while adjusting his tie. "People respect success." Then Eliza Harrington entered our lives. She was the daughter of William Harrington, the owner of the company where James worked. I first heard her name casually mentioned over dinner. "Eliza suggested I take lead on the Thompson account," James said, trying to sound nonchalant. "She thinks I have a fresh perspective that could impress her father." "That's great," I replied, genuinely happy for him. "She seems to really believe in you. She's been incredibly helpful to my career." James nodded, eyes bright with ambition. "Having connections like the Harringtons can open doors I couldn't even knock on before." I was genuinely happy that James was finding mentorship. The Harrington name carried weight in Seattle's business community, and I thought Eliza's interest in James's career was purely professional. I encouraged him to nurture the connection, believing it would benefit our future. If only I had known that this woman would become the catalyst for the most painful chapter of my life, and ironically, for my greatest triumph. But at that point, we were still happy. James still looked at me with love, and our apartment, though small, still felt like a sanctuary where we built our dreams together. As James spent more time with the upper echelon at his company, I noticed subtle changes. He began making comments about our furniture, suggesting upgrades we couldn't afford. He lingered in front of luxury car dealerships during our walks. When I gently reminded him of our financial goals, he'd sigh and say, "I know, but wouldn't it be nice to live a little?" Our conversations about the future started to shift. James began talking about vacation homes and private schools for our future children. Dreams that seemed disconnected from our reality. I attributed it to ambition and inspiration from his new professional circle. I had no idea that Eliza Harrington was slowly redefining his definition of success and ultimately his definition of happiness. At that point, my career was also advancing. My team had developed a security protocol that earned recognition within our company. We celebrated my success and James's new clients. Life was good, our future bright. We had no idea that everything was about to change. The first sign something was wrong came after a morning run. I felt unusually exhausted and dizzy, struggling to catch my breath. I brushed it off as overexertion, but the symptoms persisted for weeks. Simple tasks left me winded. Climbing the stairs to our apartment became a challenge. Maybe you should see a doctor, James suggested after finding me resting on the couch instead of working on a coding project as planned. His voice held genuine concern. You haven't been yourself lately. I made an appointment expecting to hear I was overworked or anemic. The doctor ordered standard blood work, and I went back to my life pushing through the fatigue. James was supportive, initially bringing me tea and suggesting I rest more, but as weeks passed and my symptoms worsened, I noticed a shift in his attitude. The tea deliveries stopped. His concerned questions were replaced with impatient sighs when I couldn't join him for social events with his colleagues. Eliza's hosting a gathering at her father's lake house this weekend, he mentioned one evening. Everyone from the executive team will be there. It could be huge for my career. I'm sorry, I just don't think I have the energy. I apologized, genuinely disappointed. But you should definitely go. Network for both of us. A flash of relief crossed his face before he masked it with concern. Are you sure I can stay home? Go, I insisted. One of us should take advantage of the opportunity. He returned from that weekend with stories about the Harringtons' lake house with its private dock and wine cellar. I noticed he'd started dressing differently too. More expensive shirts, a new watch I didn't recognize. Early birthday present to myself, he explained when I asked about it. Eliza says presentation matters when dealing with clients, Eliza says. Those words became increasingly common in our conversations. My follow-up doctor appointment brought disturbing news. My blood work showed abnormalities that concerned my doctor enough to refer me to a specialist. By then, I was experiencing joint pain and alarming weight loss. James began working later, often missing dinner. His phone would buzz constantly with messages he'd check discreetly. When he thought I was asleep, he'd take calls in the bathroom with the shower running to mask his voice. One night, I woke to find his side of the bed empty. His phone lay on the nightstand, and a notification illuminated the screen. I had never been the type to check his phone, but something compelled me to look. The message preview from Eliza read, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again tomorrow." My heart raced as I unlocked his phone with the birth date he'd always used as his passcode. The full conversation confirmed my worst fears. Their relationship had crossed professional boundaries weeks ago. I confronted him when he returned home at 2 a.m. "Are you having an affair with Eliza Harrington?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart. His denial was immediate. "That's ridiculous. She's my boss's daughter and a mentor. You're being paranoid, Sabrina." "I saw your messages, James." His expression hardened. "You went through my phone while I'm out working to support us. The medication is making you irrational. Eliza and I are colleagues. Those messages were about a project we're working on." I was too exhausted to argue, too stunned by his gaslighting to respond. The specialist had started me on medication that made me nauseous and dizzy. Part of me wondered if my suspicions were medication-induced paranoia. A week later, the specialist delivered devastating news. I had a rare autoimmune condition that was attacking my organs. The treatment would be extensive and expensive. Our insurance would cover only a portion of the costs. When I told James, he sat silent for a long moment before asking, "How much will this cost us?" Not, "How are you feeling?" or "We'll get through this." His first concern was financial. As my condition deteriorated, I reduced my hours at work, eventually taking medical leave. Our financial situation grew strained. James began criticizing my career choices. If you'd pursued that management track last year instead of staying technical, we'd have better insurance, he said, during a particularly difficult evening after receiving another medical bill. I was focusing on innovation, I defended weakly. Nobody plans for a health crisis. Well, we're dealing with the consequences of your choices now, he snapped. His words stung more than the needles delivering my treatments. The man who had once been my biggest supporter was now placing blame on me for getting sick. My condition worsened rapidly. What began as fatigue evolved into organ dysfunction. After collapsing at home, I was admitted to the hospital. The doctors spoke of aggressive treatment protocols and monitoring. I was terrified, but James seemed distant, checking his watch during the doctor's explanations. I have a client meeting, he explained, kissing my forehead perfunctorily. I'll try to come back later. That night in the hospital room alone, with beeping machines and my fears, I realized how dramatically my life had changed in just a few months. From a rising star in tech to a patient fighting for her life, from a woman secure in her husband's love to someone wondering if he was with another woman while she lay hospitalized. The clearest sign of James's changing priorities came when he missed a crucial consultation about treatment options. The specialist had rearranged his schedule specifically so James could attend. I called and texted him repeatedly with no response. Hours later, my coworker Diane visited, bringing flowers and company. During her visit, she hesitated before saying, "Sabrina, I don't know if I should tell you this, but I saw James yesterday at Canlis with a woman. They looked intimate." Canlis was one of Seattle's most expensive restaurants, somewhere James and I had never been able to afford. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture I couldn't bear to see clearly. The sterile hospital room became my world. White walls, the rhythmic beep of monitors, and the constant shuffle of medical staff replaced the life I once knew. My condition had deteriorated to the point where I needed constant medical supervision. The autoimmune disease was attacking my kidneys and liver, my body essentially turning against itself. James's visits became increasingly rare and brief. He would arrive looking distracted, checking his watch and phone constantly, always with an excuse about a meeting or deadline. The warm, loving husband I had married seemed to have disappeared, replaced by a stranger who viewed my illness as an inconvenience to his ascending career. My parents flew in from Arizona to help. They were retired teachers with modest savings, but they didn't hesitate to come when I needed them. Mum would sit by my bed for hours reading to me or simply holding my hand when the pain was too intense for conversation. Dad took charge of organising my medical information, questioning doctors, and researching treatment options. "Where's James?" Mum finally asked on their third day, her voice carefully neutral, but her eyes concerned. "Working," I replied automatically. "Big project." The sympathetic look my parents exchanged told me they weren't convinced. The hospital bills mounted alarmingly. Despite our insurance, the out-of-pocket expenses for my specialized treatment were astronomical. Each time a new bill arrived, I felt a crushing weight of guilt and anxiety. When I tried to discuss our finances with James during one of his brief visits, he was evasive. "I'm handling it," he said dismissively. "Focus on getting better." But his solution to handling it became clear when my best friend Maya visited. Maya and I had been friends since high school, and she'd taken time off work to fly in from Chicago. "Something's wrong with your joint account," she said quietly after my parents stepped out for coffee. "I was helping your mum sort through some bills, and she tried to access your online banking. There's significantly less money than there should be." A cold dread washed over me. How much less? About $30,000 less, Sabrina. The amount represented most of our emergency savings, painstakingly built over years of careful budgeting. With shaking hands, I asked Maya to pass me my phone. We logged into the account together, and I saw the withdrawals. Multiple large transfers over the past 3 weeks. "Call him," Maya urged, her face tight with anger. James didn't answer. I left a voicemail asking him to come to the hospital immediately. He didn't respond for 2 days. During those agonizing days of waiting, Maya took it upon herself to do some investigating. She was always the protective one in our friendship, the person who would confront anyone who hurt those she loved. While I lay in my hospital bed growing weaker, Maya was piecing together the puzzle of my husband's betrayal. She returned to the hospital with a grim expression that told me she'd discovered something significant. "He's been staying at Eliza Harrington's condo in downtown," she said. Her voice controlled but vibrating with anger. "The doorman recognized James from the photo on your Instagram. He's been coming and going like he lives there for at least 2 weeks." The confirmation of what I had suspected broke something inside me. The pain of betrayal was physical, a crushing pressure in my chest that set off the heart rate monitors. A nurse rushed in, concerned by the alarming readings, and administered medication to calm me. Dr. Reynolds, my specialist, came by later that evening. Her face was serious as she reviewed my latest test results. "Sabrina, your condition is being exacerbated by stress," she said bluntly. "Your inflammatory markers are through the roof and your kidney function is declining faster than we'd anticipated. I understand you're going through personal difficulties, but for your treatment to have any chance of success, you need to minimize emotional distress." I laughed bitterly. "So, in addition to my body betraying me and my husband abandoning me for another woman, now I need to be calm about it all, or I might die. That's a neat little trap, Doctor." Dr. Reynolds' expression softened. "I know it's an impossible ask, but we're going to adjust your medication and consider more aggressive treatment options. You need to fight Sabrina. Focus on yourself now, not him." That night, alone in the hospital room after my parents had gone to their hotel, I stared at the ceiling and tried to process how my life had unraveled so completely. Just months ago, I had been healthy, successful, and believed I was happily married. Now, I was fighting for my life. My career was on hold indefinitely, and my husband was living with another woman while draining our savings. The tears came silently sliding down my face onto the stiff hospital pillow. I wasn't just crying for the present pain, but for the future that had been stolen from me. The children James and I had planned to have, the home we'd dreamed of building, the lifetime of love and support I thought was guaranteed. My body, weakened by disease and treatment, eventually surrendered to exhausted sleep. I dreamed of falling, endlessly falling, with no one reaching out to catch me. I awoke to a text from James, "We'll come by this afternoon. We need to talk." Those words, "we need to talk," hung over me like a guillotine blade for the hours that followed. By the time the door to my room finally opened, revealing James in an expensive suit I'd never seen before, I had worked myself into such a state of anxiety that the monitors were once again registering my distress. He looked different. His haircut was new, more sophisticated than his usual style. His watch was definitely not the one we'd bought together for his birthday. Even his posture had changed, more confident, almost arrogant. This was a man who had been remade by wealth and status, who had discarded his old life like outgrown clothing. As he stood awkwardly at the foot of my bed, I realized with perfect clarity that the man I had married no longer existed, and the woman I had been, trusting, loving, believing in our shared future, was gone too, transformed by illness and betrayal into someone fighting for survival on every level. The room fell silent except for the steady beep of medical equipment. James stood there, in his tailored suit, looking out of place among the medical realities of my condition. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I waited, conserving my limited energy for whatever was coming. "You look terrible," he finally said, his voice lacking any real concern. "Cancer tends to do that," I replied flatly. The technical name for my condition was longer and more complex, but cancer was close enough for this conversation. He winced at my directness. "Look, Sabrina, this situation is complicated." "Which situation? My dying or your affair?" My voice was surprisingly steady, despite the turmoil inside me. His expression hardened. I think we both know our marriage has been struggling for some time, even before you got sick. It was a lie so blatant I almost laughed. We had been happy, plans for our future weekend trips to the coast, late-night conversations about our dreams. All real, all evidence of a solid marriage. Or so I had thought. Just say what you came to say, James. I'm too tired for games. He took a deep breath, straightening his expensive tie. Eliza and I have developed feelings for each other. It wasn't planned, but these things happen. I want a divorce. Despite suspecting it was coming, the words hit like physical blows. Each syllable a separate pain. These things happen, I repeated incredulously. You're leaving your critically ill wife for a rich woman, and these things happen is your explanation. That's not fair, he countered, his face flushing. This isn't what I signed up for, Sabrina. I'm 34. I shouldn't have to be a caretaker at this stage of my life. I have career opportunities, chances to build something significant. The cruelty of his words stole my breath. For better or worse, I whispered, in sickness and in health. Those were your vows. Vows are ideals, not practical commitments, he dismissed. Be realistic. Your condition may be chronic. The doctors aren't even sure you'll recover fully. Am I supposed to put my entire life on hold indefinitely? Each word revealed a man I no longer recognized. The person who had held my hand through college exams, who had promised me forever, was standing before me, calculating the cost-benefit analysis of staying with a sick wife. Mr. Harrington has offered me an executive position. He continued, his voice taking on an excited edge. It's the opportunity of a lifetime, but I need to be focused, committed entirely to my career path. And I'm in the way, I concluded. Your medical bills are draining our savings, he said accusingly, as if my illness were a frivolous choice. Do you know how much we've spent in the last 3 months? Money I worked hard to save. Money we saved together, I corrected, from both our incomes. He waved this away as irrelevant. The point is, this situation isn't sustainable. You might never recover fully, Sabrina. The doctors have been clear about that, and I deserve a chance at happiness. The selfishness of his statement was breathtaking. I was fighting for my life, and he was concerned about his happiness. There's something else, he said, reaching into his expensive suit jacket. He pulled out a manila envelope and placed it on my bed. Divorce papers. My lawyer says it's better to handle this cleanly while you're still able to. The implication that I might die before we could divorce was not lost on me. He wanted to ensure he wouldn't be liable for more medical bills, that he could move on with Eliza unencumbered. You're a monster, I whispered, tears finally breaking through my shock. His face hardened. I'm being practical, something you never understood. He gestured around the hospital room. I've already moved my things out. The apartment is yours until the lease ends in 2 months. After that, you'll need to make arrangements. Where am I supposed to go? I asked, genuine fear creeping into my voice. I can't work. I can barely stand. Eliza suggested you move in with your parents, he replied, as if this were a generous solution. Or perhaps a care facility. Actually, Eliza mentioned that her family's foundation supports a place for people with chronic conditions. The casual way he offered charity from my replacement was the final insult. Get out! I managed, my voice shaking with rage and despair. There's one more thing, he said, reaching for the door. Eliza can afford to pay for better medical care than I ever could. Maybe this is best for everyone. With those parting words, he left the door, closing softly behind him. I stared at the divorce papers on my bed, physical evidence of the complete demolition of my life. The monitors beside me began beeping frantically as my vitals spiked dangerously. A nurse rushed in, followed quickly by Dr. Reynolds. They spoke urgently, voices blending into background noise as darkness crept into the edges of my vision. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was Dr. Reynolds saying, "We're losing her. Call the resuscitation team now." My body, already weakened by disease, had finally been broken by betrayal. As darkness enveloped me completely, I wondered if this was truly the end, dying alone in a hospital room, abandoned by the person who had promised to love me forever. In that moment between consciousness and void, a strange calm came over me. If this was death approaching, at least the pain would end. But somewhere in the darkness, a small, fierce voice whispered, "Not like this. Not because of him." That whisper, that refusal to let James's betrayal be my final chapter, was the spark that would eventually reignite my will to live. But first, I had to survive the night. I don't remember much from the days that followed James's visit. The medical team later told me I had experienced a severe inflammatory response that sent my body into crisis. My already compromised immune system, coupled with the extreme emotional distress, had pushed me to the brink of organ failure. I drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of doctors speaking in urgent tones, of my parents' worried faces, of Maya's hand clutching mine. Time lost meaning in that liminal space between living and dying. When I finally regained full consciousness, Dr. Reynolds was adjusting my IV drip. The relief on her face when she noticed my alert gaze was palpable. "Welcome back," she said softly. "You gave us quite a scare." My throat was parched from the breathing tube they had removed earlier. "How long?" I managed to croak. "4 days," she replied, helping me sip water through a straw. "Your body went into shock after your visitor left." The memory of James's cruel goodbye flooded back, bringing with it a wave of despair so intense I had to close my eyes against it. "Sabrina," Dr. Reynolds said, her voice gentle but firm, "I know you're in an impossible situation, but I need you to understand something. Your body is fighting a war on multiple fronts. The emotional trauma you're experiencing is literally killing you. We're going to try an experimental treatment protocol, but its success depends largely on your will to recover." "My will," I whispered. "Yes. I've seen patients with less severe conditions succumb because they lost the desire to fight, and I've seen patients with more dire prognoses recover because they refused to give up. You're at that crossroads now." I turned my face away, tears sliding silently onto the pillow. "What's the point? I've lost everything. My husband, my home, my career, my health." "No," a fierce voice interrupted. Maya stood in the doorway, her normally cheerful face set in determined lines. "You haven't lost everything. You still have us. You still have yourself. And that bastard doesn't get to decide whether you live or die." My parents appeared behind her, their faces showing exhaustion but unwavering support. My father, normally stoic, had tears in his eyes. My mother moved to the bedside and took my hand in hers. "We're here, sweetheart," she said simply, "for as long as it takes." Their love surrounded me like a protective shield, but the mountain ahead seemed insurmountable. How could I rebuild when every foundation had crumbled? The answer came unexpectedly the following day. Kevin, a former colleague from the tech startup, visited during lunch hour. He brought flowers and an awkward but genuine concern for my condition. After the obligatory small talk, he mentioned, "I've been thinking about that security protocol your team was developing before you got sick. The one with the adaptive authentication model." I nodded, memories of my work life seeming distant and unreal. "Well, there's been increased demand for exactly that type of solution since the recent breaches at those financial institutions," Kevin continued. "No one's been able to build something as elegant as what you were conceptualizing." For the first time in weeks, my mind engaged with something beyond my illness and betrayal. "The approach would need refinement," I said slowly. "The biggest challenge was balancing security with user experience." Kevin's eyes lit up. "Exactly. And with the new privacy regulations coming, companies are desperate for solutions." He hesitated, then added, "Look, I know this is terrible timing, but I've been thinking of striking out on my own. If you're interested, maybe we could develop your concept together. No pressure or timeline, just something to think about during recovery." After he left, I found myself contemplating his suggestion. The familiar terrain of coding problems and technological challenges offered a mental escape from the hospital room. That night, I asked Maya to bring my laptop from the apartment. "Are you sure?" she asked, doubtfully. "The doctors said you need rest." "My body needs rest," I corrected. "My mind needs purpose." The next day, a surprise visitor arrived, Sandra Thompson, my hospital roommate, from my first week of admission. She had been discharged but returned for a follow-up appointment and decided to check on me. Sandra was in her 60s, a retired business professor with a sharp mind and no-nonsense attitude. When she heard about Kevin's visit and my nascent idea, she pulled up a chair. "Tell me more about this security concept," she said, crossing her arms expectantly. For the next hour, I explained the technical aspects while Sandra listened intently, occasionally asking incisive questions about market application and business models. "You know," she said finally, "this has real potential, not just as a product but as a company. Have you considered that angle?" I laughed weakly. "I'm literally fighting for my life in a hospital bed, Sandra. Starting a company isn't exactly on my priority list." Her expression remained serious. "Sometimes the best businesses are born from the deepest adversity. When we have nothing left to lose, we find the courage to attempt what we never would have dared before." She pulled out a business card from her purse. "My former student runs a venture capital firm focusing on security startups. When you're ready, not now, but when you're stronger, give him a call. Tell him I sent you." I accepted the card more out of politeness than belief, but something about Sandra's conviction planted a seed in my mind. What if my professional knowledge could be the lifeline I so desperately needed? Over the following weeks, as the experimental treatment slowly began to take effect, I divided my limited energy between physical recovery and developing my security concept. Maya brought books on business formation and startup financing. My father helped create spreadsheets for potential costs and revenue projections. Dr. Reynolds noticed the change in my demeanour during her rounds. "You seem more present," she observed. "More engaged." "I'm working on something," I admitted. "A business idea," she smiled. "Good. The mind and body are connected in ways we're only beginning to understand scientifically. Having a purpose, a future to work toward, can be as powerful as any medication I prescribe." One afternoon, while I was working on my laptop, Maya burst into the room, her face flushed with excitement. "I got in," she exclaimed. "The venture capital firm agreed to a video call. They want to hear your pitch directly." I stared at her in shock. "What? How?" "I sent them an email explaining your concept and situation," she admitted, "using Sandra's students' contact info. I may have slightly exaggerated how far along the development is." "Maya, I'm not ready for a pitch. I'm in a hospital gown, for God's sake." "Which is exactly why this is perfect," she countered. "If they're interested in your idea, even when you're at your lowest point, imagine how they'll respond when you're back at full strength." 2 days later, propped up in my hospital bed with my hair brushed and wearing a borrowed blouse over my hospital gown, I pitched my security solution to 3 serious-faced investors via video call. I spoke about the technical innovations the market need and my vision for implementation. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then the lead investor, a woman named Janet, asked, "What's your timeline for development?" I took a deep breath. "I'll be honest with you. I'm currently undergoing treatment for a serious medical condition. My recovery timeline is uncertain, but I'm committed to this project and I'm using my hospital time to refine the concept and architecture." Another pause. Then Janet nodded. "We appreciate your transparency. Most founders try to hide their challenges. Your approach is refreshing." She glanced at her colleagues before continuing. "We'd like to offer you seed funding to begin development. A small amount now, with additional funding when you're able to assemble a team." The call ended with a commitment of $50,000 in initial investment, enough to begin building a prototype and establish the legal framework for a company. As Maya danced around the hospital room in celebration, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before James's betrayal. Hope, not just for survival, but for a future worth fighting for. That night, as I drifted towards sleep, I realized I hadn't thought about James all day. His abandonment still hurt profoundly, but it no longer defined me. Something new was taking shape from the ashes of my former life, something that was entirely mine. The experimental treatment continued, and gradually my body began responding. The inflammation markers decreased. My organ function stabilized. Dr. Reynolds cautiously used the word improvement during her updates. 6 weeks after James walked out of my hospital room, I took my first steps without assistance, wobbly and brief, but steps nonetheless. As I stood shakily beside my bed, gripping the rail for support, I made a promise to myself. This recovery, this second chance at life would be on my terms. James had left me to die, but I would live, not just survive, but thrive, in ways he could never imagine. 6 months after James left me in that hospital room, I was sitting in a small rented office space in downtown Seattle. My health had improved enough for me to be discharged, though I still required regular treatments and careful monitoring. My parents had extended their stay, converting their retirement plans to accommodate my needs. They had found a small 2-bedroom apartment where we could live together during my recovery. Maya had become not just my emotional support, but my business partner. She had quit her job in Chicago and moved to Seattle, investing her savings alongside the venture capital we'd secured. Her background in marketing complemented my technical expertise perfectly. Adaptive Shield Security, Maya announced, placing a freshly printed business card on the desk before me, your vision becoming reality. I ran my fingers over the embossed logo, a simple shield design with code elements integrated into the pattern. Our company name and my title, Sabrina Maxwell, founder and CEO. Seems surreal, I admitted. 6 months ago, I was dying in a hospital bed, abandoned and broken. Now we're launching a company. Not just launching, Maya corrected, thriving. The prototype is exceeding expectations. The additional funding is secured, and we've got 3 potential clients lined up for the beta test. She wasn't exaggerating. The security solution I'd conceptualized had evolved into a robust platform under our small team's development. We had hired 2 brilliant programmers who believed in the vision enough to accept modest salaries in exchange for equity. Our workspace was humble, just enough room for 4 desks and a small meeting area, but it was ours. My health journey continued alongside the business development. The experimental treatment had stopped my condition from progressing, and some of the damage was slowly reversing. I still had good days and bad days, still needed medications and monitoring, but I was undeniably improving. One evening, scrolling through social media to unwind, I came across photos of James and Eliza at a charity gala. James in a tuxedo, Eliza draped in designer wear, both smiling broadly for the camera. The caption mentioned William Harrington's generous donation and his daughter's engagement to up-and-coming executive James Maxwell. The photos should have hurt more than they did. 6 months earlier, they might have sent me spiraling back into despair. But now, sitting in the office of the company I was building, I felt something unexpected indifference. James looked like a stranger to me, a well-dressed mannequin playing a role in someone else's life. I closed the app and returned to reviewing our latest development sprint results. My life was moving forward on a completely different path, one that James had no part in shaping. Time accelerated as our company gained momentum. 1 year after my hospitalization, Adaptive Shield Security had secured its first major client, a regional bank implementing our authentication system. The revenue allowed us to move to larger offices and hire 3 more developers. My medical journey reached a significant milestone around the same time. Dr. Reynolds, reviewing my latest test results, used the word remission for the first time. "I won't say you're cured," she cautioned. "This condition can flare again with stress or other triggers, but you've achieved what many thought impossible. Your body has stabilized and several markers have returned to near normal ranges. Thank you," I said, emotion making my voice thick, "for not giving up on me when everyone else did." She smiled. "You did the hard part, Sabrina. You chose to live when dying might have been easier." The 2-year mark brought explosive growth for Adaptive Shield. Our solution had proven so effective that industry leaders began taking notice. A feature in a prominent tech publication highlighted our innovative approach and my unusual journey from hospital bed to CEO. After the article was published, investment offers poured in. We carefully selected partners who shared our vision, securing enough capital to expand nationally. Our team grew to 25, then 40. We moved to an entire floor in a downtown office building with views of the Puget Sound I once thought I'd never live to see again. My personal life evolved too. Through a business networking event, I met Daniel, a kind and brilliant software architect, who asked thoughtful questions about our security protocols and then more hesitantly asked me to dinner. Our relationship developed slowly with respect for my health journey and complicated past. He attended doctor appointments when I wanted support, gave me space when I needed it, and never once made me feel that my medical history was a burden. As Adaptive Shield approached its 3rd anniversary, our valuation crossed the $50 million mark. We had become the security solution of choice for financial institutions across the country, with international expansion on the horizon. My office on the top floor of our building featured floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that reminded me daily how far I'd come. Maya burst into my office one morning, her expression a mix of shock and amusement. "You won't believe who just walked into reception asking to speak with you." My stomach dropped. Somehow I knew before she said it. "James is downstairs. He's applying for our VP of Business Development position." The job opening had been posted the previous week. We needed someone with marketing experience and industry connections to lead our expansion efforts. The position offered a substantial salary and equity options, appealing to any ambitious executive. Did he know it was my company when he applied? I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline suddenly coursing through me. "Apparently not," Maya replied. "He saw the job listing through a recruiter. He nearly fell over when he walked in and saw our logo with your name listed as founder. According to Caitlin at reception, he turned white as a sheet." I took a deep breath, considering my options. The professional response would be to have HR inform him the position was filled, or that his qualifications didn't match our needs. The personal response might involve security escorting him from the building, but something else entirely occurred to me, something both professional and deeply personal. "Send him up," I said quietly. Maya's eyes widened. "Are you sure you don't owe him anything, Sabrina?" "Certainly not your time." "I know," I nodded, "but I need this. For closure." 20 minutes later, a knock at my office door announced his arrival. I had used the time to center myself, to remember who I now was. Not the broken woman in a hospital bed, but the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company I had built from nothing. "Come in," I called, my voice confident. The door opened, and there stood James. 3 years had changed him, but not in the ways I expected. He looked older, certainly, but also diminished somehow. His expensive suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders or the strain around his eyes. The confident, almost arrogant man who had delivered divorce papers to my hospital bed was gone, replaced by someone who radiated anxiety. "Sabrina," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I had no idea. This was your company. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Please sit down. He did so, perched uncomfortably on the edge of the seat like a student called to the principal's office. Your resume was forwarded to me this morning, I said, keeping my tone professional. You're applying for our VP of Business Development position. He nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, I've been following Adaptive Shield's growth. The security solution is revolutionary. I didn't connect it to you until I walked into your lobby. Tell me about your current position, I said, as if this were a normal job interview, as if he hadn't left me to die 3 years ago. His eyes darted around the office, taking in the awards on the walls, the view of the city, the visible symbols of success. I'm currently between opportunities, he admitted. The economic downturn hit the luxury sector hard. I waited, saying nothing, letting the silence compel him to continue. William Harrington's investment firm collapsed 8 months ago, he finally explained. Fraud allegations. The SEC investigation revealed extensive mismanagement. Everyone associated with Harrington was essentially blacklisted in the industry. And Eliza, I asked the first personal question I'd allowed myself. James's expression tightened. She left when her family's money disappeared. Turned out she was as conditional in her commitments as... He trailed off, realizing the implication of his words. As you were with me, I finished for him. He had the decency to look ashamed. Sabrina, I know nothing I can say will ever be adequate. What I did to you was unforgivable. I convinced myself it was about opportunity and happiness, but it was really about greed and weakness. I was dazzled by wealth and status, and I betrayed the only person who ever truly loved me. His words might once have meant something to me. Now they were just sounds, acknowledgements that came years too late. Why should I hire you, James? I asked directly. Give me one reason that makes business sense. He straightened slightly. I do have extensive marketing experience and industry connections. I understand how to position technical solutions for non-technical decision makers. I could help Adaptive Shield expand its market presence significantly. Those skills are valuable, I acknowledged, but they're not unique. Dozens of candidates have similar qualifications without our complicated history. You're right, he conceded, shoulders slumping in defeat. There's no logical reason to hire me. I'm desperate, Sabrina. I've been unemployed for months. My reputation is tied to the Harrington scandal. No one will take my calls. I studied him silently, this man, who had once been the center of my world. The man whose betrayal had nearly killed me. The man who now sat before me, humbled and desperate, seeking salvation from the very person he had abandoned. I'm going to be direct with you, James, I said finally. I built this company from a hospital bed after you left me there to die. I created something meaningful and valuable while fighting for my life. A life you decided wasn't worth your time or commitment. Every person who works here is chosen not just for their skills, but for their character and integrity. His face fell as he recognized the inevitable rejection coming. You failed the character assessment 3 years ago, I continued. And while I believe people can change, I've worked too hard building this company culture to risk it on someone who abandoned their spouse at their most vulnerable moment. I understand, he whispered, rising from his chair. I'm sorry for wasting your time. James, I said as he reached for the door, I don't hate you anymore. That might surprise you, but it's true. Hating you would require energy. I'd rather invest elsewhere. What I feel is nothing. You're a stranger to me now. Someone from a past life. He nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. For what it's worth, I'm glad you survived. The world is better with you in it, creating and leading. I wish I had been strong enough to see that then. As the door closed behind him, I sat in the silence of my office, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The encounter I had dreaded for years had come and gone, leaving me not with renewed pain, but with an unexpected sense of completion. The circle had closed. The story had ended. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Still on for dinner tonight, made reservations at that new place you mentioned. I smiled as I replied affirmatively. Life continued with new chapters and new characters. The woman James had left in that hospital bed no longer existed. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and immeasurably more powerful, not despite the betrayal, but because of how she had risen above it. 3 years had passed since that pivotal meeting with James in my office. Adaptive Shield security had grown beyond even my ambitious projections, expanding internationally with offices in London, Singapore, and Toronto. Our client list included major financial institutions, healthcare systems, and government agencies who trusted our innovative security solutions to protect their most sensitive data. The company valuation had soared past $200 million, making me a wealthy woman by any standard. But the true wealth in my life came from the purpose I'd found and the relationships I'd built along the way. My health journey had stabilized into a manageable routine. While I would always need to monitor my condition and maintain certain treatments, I had achieved a quality of life that Dr. Reynolds had once thought impossible. She now used my case in her lectures to medical students as an example of how determination and purpose can influence physical recovery. The morning sun streamed through the windows of my home office as I prepared notes for an upcoming keynote speech at a major tech conference. The house, a comfortable but not ostentatious lakeside property, was quiet except for the occasional sounds of Daniel working in his studio downstairs. We had married the previous year in a small ceremony attended by those who had supported me through the darkest times. Maya knocked on the open door, tablet in hand. As both my best friend and COO of Adaptive Shield, she seamlessly bridged my personal and professional worlds. "The foundation paperwork is finalized," she announced with a smile. "The Adaptive Recovery Foundation is officially launched." I felt a surge of satisfaction. The foundation represented the fulfillment of a promise I'd made to myself in that hospital bed years ago, to create something that would support others facing similar battles with autoimmune conditions. The foundation would provide financial assistance for treatment costs, fund research into innovative therapies, and create resources for patients navigating the complex healthcare system. "We've already received 40 applications for the Patient Assistance Program," Maya continued, "and Sandra Thompson has agreed to serve as board chairperson." Sandra, my former hospital roommate, whose business advice had been instrumental in Adaptive Shield's creation, had remained a valued mentor and friend. Now, in her 70s, she brought wisdom and extensive non-profit experience to our foundation. "Perfect," I nodded. "And the workplace program? 10 companies have signed on to pilot the Return to Work initiative," Maya confirmed. "They'll implement flexible schedules and support systems for employees recovering from serious illnesses." This particular program held special significance for me. I remembered all too well the fear of losing not just my health, but my professional identity. Creating pathways for others to maintain their careers during health crises felt like healing a wound in the collective experience. As Maya left to attend a meeting, I found myself reflecting on the circuitous path that had led me here. James's betrayal, which had once seemed like the end of everything, had ultimately been the catalyst for a life more meaningful and impactful than I could have imagined. I had learned that true strength often emerges only when we are broken open. That resilience isn't about avoiding pain, but about transforming it into purpose. That sometimes losing what we thought we needed creates space for what we truly deserve. Daniel appeared in the doorway, coffee mugs in hand. His quiet presence in my life had been a revelation. Love that supported without suffocating, that respected my independence while offering unwavering partnership. "Working on your speech?" he asked, placing a mug beside me. "Just finished," I replied, accepting both the coffee and the quick kiss he offered. "I've decided to share more of my personal story this time, not just the business journey, but the whole truth." He nodded approvingly. "Your story might be exactly what someone in that audience needs to hear." Later that week, I stood on stage before hundreds of tech industry professionals. The spotlight was warm on my face as I moved away from the prepared remarks about security innovations and market trends. The technology we've developed at Adaptive Shield was born in a hospital room, I began, my voice steady, not in a research lab or a garage startup, but in the space between life and death, between betrayal and rebirth. I shared the unvarnished truth of my journey, the illness, James's abandonment, the depths of despair, and the painful climb back to life and purpose. The audience sat in rapt silence, connecting with the human story behind the successful company. I tell you this not for sympathy, I concluded, but because I believe our greatest innovations often come from our deepest wounds. The places where we've been broken become the spaces where new light enters. My security solution was designed to protect vulnerable systems because I understood vulnerability in the most personal way possible. My company culture prioritizes integrity because I experienced firsthand the devastation that comes when trust is broken. After the applause and the questions, after the networking reception and the drive home, I stood on my deck, overlooking the lake. The water reflected the moonlight in rippling patterns, beautiful in its constant motion and change. Maya joined me, handing me a glass of wine. "Quite a day," she observed. "Your speech is already trending online." "Is it strange that after everything I feel grateful?" I asked quietly, not for the illness or betrayal, but for where they led me, for who they helped me become. "Not strange at all," she replied. "You alchemized pain into purpose, Sabrina. Not everyone can do that." The night air was cool against my skin as I considered the full circle of my journey. James had left me to die for his rich mistress, thinking I would be gone forever. Now I led a multi-million-dollar company and a foundation that would help countless others. The symmetry wasn't lost on me, but it no longer defined me. My story had transcended the betrayal that once seemed to be its central plot point. What remained was the truth I now shared with others facing their own impossible challenges. Sometimes life breaks us open so that something greater can emerge. Sometimes being left behind is the beginning of finding your way forward. And sometimes the things meant to destroy us become the very seeds of our most significant creation. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that eventually led to something better in your life? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need this message today. Remember, your darkest moments don't define your story. They're just the challenging chapters before your greatest triumph. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.